Welcome back to another episode of the Oneonone podcast. I'm Lyle Allenstein.
I'm Lexi Linderman.
And I'm Avery Hill.
Today we're going to be recapping Penn State's Week 2 win over Bowling Green, previewing the upcoming bye week, and discussing how the Nittany Lions did in the NFL after Week 1. So let's start it off with Penn State beating Bowling Green. Overall, what are some of your takeaways from that?
Well, I think people are a little bit concerned about the defense, and I think that's for good reason. I mean, you have a MAC team coming to town that everyone thought Penn State was going to wipe the floor with. I mean, we all predicted like 55-6, 60-0, and then they squeak away with a 34-27 win. And honestly, in the first half, the Bowling Green offense was just dominating Penn State's defense, which is something that we haven't really seen out of Penn State's defense in years. Like, they've always been the dominant one. I mean, they hadn't let up a first drive touchdown in 28 games, and Bowling Green marched right down the field in 2 minutes and just put 7 on their heads. I think a big part of that was Harold Fannin Jr., Bowling Green's tight end, one of the best tight ends in the country. He was just so explosive. He was everywhere out there. He was easily Bowling Green's best offensive player on that field. But I also just think Penn State's defense just was missing way too many tackles. I mean, Franklin said post-game he felt like the defense was trying to make too many plays, do too much. And so, I mean, I didn't really notice that during the game, but I guess looking back on it, you can kind of see that. But I think that there's definitely a lot of concerns about the defense. But I mean, they came away with a win, which is really all that matters at the end of the day. I mean, Oregon's had some close games, and they're one of the best teams in the country according to most people. So, it just sometimes it happens, but I mean, they're still 2-0, but there's definitely some concerns about the defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think off of that, I think that the defense just came in. I do agree with Franklin. I think they did try to kind of make too many plays. I mean, you see that a lot of the times when you're playing, teams that might not be, the highest ranked teams, net 200 teams, things like that. Like, you're going to take them lightly. And when that happens, I know sometimes star players are like, okay, this is my chance to go have a, 4-sack game, 15-tackle game, and they don't focus on the fundamentals. And that's what happens. I mean, you saw it in the first half, missing tackles, allowing explosive plays. I think it was a 41-yard touchdown on the ground. Like, things like that cannot happen, but they do happen when you kind of start to underestimate your opponent, and you got to pick it up, and they did in the second half, which is why they were able to squeak out a victory.
Yeah, I think going off that too, I think the other big concern was Penn State's just not getting any pressure off that D line. I mean, I don't think they had a single sack the entire game. And again, this is not this is a MAC team. Like, you have Abdul Carter, a defensive, Denai Dennis Sutton. Like, those guys are supposed to be putting up sacks, and they're not right now. And especially against Bowling Green, I think people were expecting to see that. So I definitely think that's a little bit of a concern. I mean, it's obviously not as aggressive as a defense as Manny Diaz is, but still, I feel like the pressure's just not there, and I think that that's something that Penn State needs to have moving forward.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point with the no sacks, because there were so many instances in the game where they were close. But I think Franklin talked about it yesterday at media, but the point of emphasis that the Bowling Green offense had was they knew their tackles weren't going to be able to compete with the edges in the defensive line from Penn State, so they emphasized getting the ball out quickly. And I think Connor Bazelak did a great job in the first half, and that was something that Penn State needed to adjust on in the second half, because when you look at the first half defensively, Bowling Green put up more total yards than Penn State gave up against West Virginia. And then second half they adjusted. They focused on the tackling, which Devon J. Thomas talked about after the game was just, he was like, it was miserable. Tony Rojas said the same thing. Abdul said the same thing. But it also brings up the point that Devon J. Thomas was like, yeah, they were nervous for their first game at Beaver Stadium, I think. But I think part of it was just, I think they were hungover from the West Virginia game. I don't think they really anticipated that kind of competition coming in from Bowling Green, and I don't think they were ready. Devon J. Thomas directly said everyone wanted to knock their guy, Bowling Green's lights loose. So I think that was something that was a point of emphasis. But other than that, I think Franklin also touched on the helmet communication. Was an issue with obviously Kobe King was wearing the mic, and I think that was an interesting thing for me to take away, because when they were prepping for West Virginia, a lot of that helmet communication attention was directed toward Bo and Drew, because they were prepping for an away environment, where that crowd noise was going to be louder. But then when you're coming back to Beaver Stadium, it's the other side of the ball. The defense is going to, obviously third down, Beaver Stadium's, it's loud, just trying to fire at the defense. Didn't hear Mo Bamba. That was a complaint of mine, but we could move on from that. So a lot of adjustments they have to make. Obviously, this is a good time, I think, for the bye week for them just to really focus. Obviously, tackling at practice was a big thing when we saw during our viewing session, and we never really see tackling. So I just thought that was something that, hey, we really got to focus on this. Obviously, Franklin said it, Tony Rojas, Abdul Carter, a win is a win, but when the spread was 38.5, and obviously Bowling Green is a respectable MAC opponent, they very well could win the MAC, but that game, if you play well defensively in the first half, it's a 30-plus point win. But I think defense, obviously, we stressed on that enough. But offensively, I think, a couple of big games, if someone wants to talk about that.
Yeah, I think the offense looked great. We saw a huge day from Tyler Warren, Penn State school record for most receiving yards in a game, so he had a huge day. But I think I think overall the offense is still looking explosive. They look very explosive. I think that's going to be huge going forward. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both put up over 100 yards, and we talked last week about Allen only getting like 20 yards on the ground against West Virginia, so it was big for him to have that kind of game. I think it's going to be really good for them going forward as a running back duo, because I think people are kind of are expecting them to both go off at the same time, and that's not always going to happen, but it did on Saturday, and that was a huge deal for the offense. Nick Singleton had another 40-plus yard touchdown run, which is also huge. The only thing that's a little concerning is still the wide receivers. I think, Amari Evans had a touchdown catch, but outside of that, They really did not do that much at all. Julian Fleming recorded his first catch, only went for 3 yards. Liam Clifford still does not have a catch, even though we've heard so much offseason buzz about him. Harrison Wallace III did not have a catch as well. Did he?
I think he had
No,
one.
he didn't have a catch.
Yeah.
He didn't? Yeah, he didn't have a
barely
catch.
any targets either,
even
so.
after having that huge game at West Virginia. So I think that's still a concern. I mean, obviously Tyler Warren made up for it with his huge day, but I mean, you got to have all the options at your disposal moving forward against better teams, and so it's just kind of odd against Bowling Green. They didn't really see any wide receiver production.
Yeah, I mean, going off of that, I mean, I think the one thing that stood out to me is that the run game is there. Obviously, you saw it against West Virginia. You're seeing it again. You're seeing Katron and Nick kind of get involved. I mean, I think that's a big thing for Penn State moving forward, to be able to establish that run game, because that is the strongest part of their offense. I mean, I think that's something Kotelnicki is definitely, focused on in the offseason and in camp, trying to get that run game established. But with the pass game, I mean, you still have to get that established. I mean, you're going into, not right now, but, in a few weeks you'll be going into a stretch where you're playing schools like USC and schools, Ohio State, the Washingtons of the world, those teams, and you're going to need to find a way to pass the ball, because if they step up on defense and they're like, okay, we're going to load the box and not allow you to run the ball at all, then you might have problems. So I think that's something they need to work on. But I know Franklin talked about, the snap count kind of being low. So I think that'll, kind of work both ways. And the defense kind of will need to step up and, get off the field and give them more time to, run plays and things. But at the same time, the offense, I think they need to kind of adjust and shift and just find out a way to, get more plays, get more passes. I mean, I think a way they can do that is just kind of keeping it simple. I mean, you can take your shots and everything, but kind of keep it simple to kind of get your offense together, because, of course, this is a new offense. I mean, you're adding Julian Fleming to the equation. You even have Luke Reynolds at tight end, who's expected to, take a big jump as a freshman. So there's a lot of new pieces and a new offensive coordinator, so you're going to have to kind of have that filling out process. But I will say there's not a better time to do it than early in the season, especially when you can still squeak out that victory at the end.
I also think it's good. So far, Drew has looked great, and I think a lot of fans kind of felt like if he had a big year, Penn State's going to have a big year. And so far, through 2 games, I mean, he's looked great. I mean, it was big against, Ohio State last year and Michigan, where they knew they just needed to stop Penn State's run game because they didn't think that anything was there in the passing game. So I do think it's big that he's looked good, because then it kind of, against the better teams, they have to respect him. They have to respect what he's able to do. I mean, he had that one bad throw in the end zone for that interception. But other than that, I mean, he had a great game. And again, we kind of underestimated the opponent. I mean, whatever. And he looked good against West Virginia too. So I think that's going to be huge going forward. Is if he has that confidence that we've seen the first 2 games, then I'm sure the passing game will follow. The wide receivers will want to step up for their quarterback, and so I think that's going to be big.
Yeah, I think you take away that interception from Drew, and I think he had one just really bad throw to Julian Fleming that Fleming was actually open on, so that was a little bit of disappointment to see Fleming create space and not get the ball. But I think you take away those 2 throws, and then I don't think on paper it matches up with his game against West Virginia last year. But I think that would have been Drew's. I think that was Drew's best game. Just how he looked in the pocket, obviously stepping up. I think excluding the rushing yards, I think obviously you saw it look a little bit better against West Virginia last week, because he tried to make a play with his legs and ended up getting sacked for 23 yards. But just some of the throws that he was making, I thought I was really impressed. I really liked the touchdown he threw to Nick Singleton. I thought that was a really tight window. It rifled it over the middle. And I think that was just a big improvement, the confidence making these throws, because when you're throwing checkdowns and wide receiver screens every 5 seconds like he was last year, you don't really get to see the pedigree, that why he was a 5-star, why he was a top recruit, why Penn State had so much confidence in him going in. Why the "we want Drew" chants were there for him freshman year every time Sean Clifford messed up. But so I was impressed with Drew. But I think going back to the wide receivers, my biggest thing is like, how do you really want to get them involved? Because it's like, I don't want to write them off just quite yet. Obviously, you saw Harrison Wallace, have that big game in West Virginia. Obviously, the game script just flowed more naturally to get Tyler Warren the ball. It's been a point of emphasis to get Omari Evans the ball. Obviously, big play against West Virginia week 1, even though it was offensive pass interference. Sorry, Omari. And then but he had that touchdown week 2. He had the other one called back that, ball don't lie. That one was pass interference. They got him back this time. But like Caden Saunders, obviously he's still recovering from injury. Obviously, he's just been fielding punt returns, but every single one has been a fair catch. And then the one he tried to take against Bowling Green, he fumbled. So it's like he's still working his way back, obviously. And then Tyler Warren, he's going to be there, arguably one of the best tight end in the country. Khalil Dinkins finally saw the field and limited action. And then Luke Reynolds, I think we're going to find out on Monday that he's going to get his red shirt burned, get the green light, because he started last week. He played meaningful snaps week 1. But my biggest thing is, like, how do you guys want to get some of these playmakers the ball? Because obviously we saw Colton Nicky getting the running backs. We saw him increase Bo's workload. So my biggest thing is, like, how would you guys go about getting them, Barack?
I mean, I think it might just have to not come from the receivers. Sometimes you literally do not have that talent. I think that's something that has been a little evident so far. I mean, I think Trey Wallace has done a good job. Harrison Wallace, I think Omari Evans has done a good job. But, I mean, of course, you haven't seen a lot of Julian Fleming. You haven't seen a lot of Liam Clifford. You haven't seen a lot of Caden Saunders. I mean, you still want to try to get them the ball, whether it's, Colton Nicky's creative. I mean, you can go run a little jet touch pass that I spam in college football 25. You can have different plays like little out routes, quick outs, quick plays just to get them the ball. I mean, you have to kind of get them comfortable regardless. But I do think that they're in a good enough position to where they can also rely on the running backs. With Nick Singleton, he's stepped up in a big way as a receiver this year. I mean, of course, tight ends, you have Tyler Warren. I mean, Luke Reynolds, I think both of those guys are going to step up. And, of course, Tyler Warren's already, been established, one of the best tight ends in the country. So I think that'll be something they kind of have to rely on until those receivers kind of come along. But if you say, okay, we have Nick Singleton, we have Tyler Warren, we have Luke Reynolds, and we have Omari Evans catching the ball, I don't think that's a bad core. I don't think that you're going to lose games because that's your core.
I also don't think they're going to lose games because that's their core. I honestly think, Tyler Warren touched on this post-game. Like, week 1, it was Harrison Wallace with the big game, and then week 2, it was him. And he basically said in Colton Nicky's offense, he thinks any week it could be anyone else. And so I think, honestly, we'll see a big game from Omari Evans soon because his speed is just unmatched. I mean, he always seems to be getting thrown a deep ball by Drew. And so I think that's going to keep continuing. And I think the issue with Clifford and Fleming is, like you said last week, Lyle, Fleming's not a slot guy, and they have him lined up in the slot.
Less of it last week.
Less of it last week, but still, if they want to get him the ball, it's not going to be through the slot. And if they want to get Liam Clifford involved, then they have to utilize the slot more, and that's basically it. I mean, I don't think they've been utilizing the slot that much at all. They're mostly going for more explosive plays, I think, is what I've been seeing. So I think it might just. I don't think they should shy away from the explosive plays. Obviously, I think that's working for them. They need to keep it going. But if people need to see Liam Clifford involved, then they got to go through the slot for that. Yeah,
but so because you talked about last year, Michigan, Ohio State just needed to key in on the run in order to beat Penn State because Drew wasn't going to beat them, right? Mm-hmm. Just with offensive play calling. Obviously, Drew's better now, but obviously, give or take a few players that have transferred, gone to the league, brought in a few guys. Do you really think if opposing teams like Ohio State key in on the running backs, Tyler Warren, that the core around it is going to be good enough? Because we saw it last year that it wasn't. Well, I think it's hard to key in on Tyler Warren. I think that's the thing. I think that's what Franklin has talked about, is that he's one of the most complete tight ends in the country, and so they don't know what he's going to do every play. But I honestly think as long as Harrison Wallace stays healthy, I think he is going to be good enough for Penn State to have a passing game against some of the best defenses in the country. And I honestly think they might underestimate guys like Omari Evans and Julian Fleming, and I think that as a result could help Penn State in the long run. But I also think people don't realize, like Avery said, how much Nick and Katron develop as pass catchers. I asked Nick about it after the Bowling Green win because of that touchdown catch he had, and he was like, this is what we've been working on this all season. Sider said it at Big Ten Media at Penn State Media Day that they've been emphasizing that, and so it's clearly shown. And so I think they have, like Avery said, they have a lot of pass-catching threats, and it might just not always be the wide receivers, but I think if the wide receivers need to step up, I think the team has enough confidence in them that they can.
And I also think, I mean, looking back at Kotelnicki's offense with Kansas, I mean, you saw the same thing to where, they had their tight ends were really their best receivers. I mean, I think Mason Fairchild was one of their leading receivers. I mean, they had the only difference is their receivers were a lot taller. Their wide receivers are a lot taller, so it kind of changed the game. But I mean, at running back, of course, again, Devin Neal. I mean, he was basically all nation running back. I mean, probably one of the best in the country. And the same thing that he's doing at Penn State is what he's doing at Kansas, getting his playmakers the ball. So I think that's the one thing that'll help. And then it's college football. I mean, college football, it's a lot of coaching. I mean, just because you don't have the flat out talent, you can coach. And if you can coach, you can scheme together a game that gets everyone involved or, gets your best players in the best position to succeed. And I think that's what Kotelnicki is leaning on. And, again, it's early in the season, so I think they'll kind of settle in a little more. I think you'll see more production from the wide receiver room, but I don't think it'll be any, top-end talent.
Yeah, I think it's just a wait and see when they play the tougher opponents with the offense. Obviously, we're speaking on them like they were concerned, but realistically, going into the Kent State game, I think all our eyes are going to be on the defense. So I think that was a good thing we just touched on. Other than that, big week from Riley Thompson, special teams player of the week, 4 punts, average of 47 yards. And then Sander Sahadak, I thought, knocked in both his field goals. Obviously, missed his one from West Virginia last week, which obviously concerns considering he got pulled week 1, 2023 after missing his field goal. So I think that was good confidence. Justin Lustig on Zoom this week talked about how that was a really good thing for him to get his confidence going. Obviously, he had a great camp, beat out the 2 guys in Ryan Barker and Chase Meyer, who they brought in from Tulsa. Obviously, they increased that competition, and they think he earned it. Lustig said that he can kick close to 60 yards if wind isn't a factor, so I don't really know about that, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Everyone says that.
Yeah, right. So, but then, he posted on Instagram with the classic, I think I got my swagger back. So I think he's confident and happy that he got those to knock through. So I think that's a good recap of Bowling Green. So obviously they got the bye week this week, plenty of stuff that they got to work on. But we saw practice yesterday, and we got a different look than what we normally do. Obviously, we're normally there on Wednesdays. They're on Tuesday this week, and we got to see some different things. So if someone wants to talk about that.
We got to see some one-on-ones. It was actually very unexpected, especially because they started out with the usual ball security, and I was like, okay, here we go. And then the usual, quarterbacks passing to wide receivers, whatever. And then Franklin was just line up. We're doing one-on-ones. And so it's really interesting to see. We saw A.J. Harris kind of wrap up Amari Evans, but Franklin was still really complimentary of Amari. Was proud of how he went for the ball. I think that was a really big point of emphasis for Franklin during that, was he just wanted to see the receivers going for the ball no matter what. We saw Liam Clifford just absolutely leave a guy in the dust on a route.
Where is that though during the game?
No, exactly. Where is that at? But yeah, no, one-on-ones was super interesting. I was definitely not expecting to see that at all. And then, yeah, it was really cool. We don't really usually get a look like that. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the beauty of the bye week. I mean, I think you have a little bit of, leeway to kind of just do things and kind of have fun with it. I mean, I think I even saw Franklin kind of participate in drills a little bit. I think that's something that you're able to do in a bye week. And, of course, they're still okay, we're not really showing you anything. They're not going to kind of give away things except for the fact that Liam Clifford has sneaky speed. So, I mean, I think in general it was just, good to see that, there's fun in practice.
Yeah, I liked, obviously the one-on-ones were cool considering we just see checkdowns and ball security drill. But another thing I kind of looked at was when we were going through the order that the wide receivers were going through the drills, obviously it's been established whenever we go to the drills. It's in no particular order. You see Fleming, you see Amari Evans, you see Clifford, and you see Trey Wallace. They're all going first with, obviously we don't really know where Caden Saunders is, but I would assume fully healthy he's going in. But I kind of looked at the guys after that, and you saw Tyler Johnson, who is the only other wide receiver to see the field so far. For Penn State. Obviously, Bowling Green, he played 2 snaps, but he got some work in during the West Virginia game. And then you saw Anthony Ivey and Tysier Denmark, and that was my first real look at Tysier Denmark getting work in with the ones. I really hope that Penn State puts itself in a position with a comfortable lead against Kent State, considering they're the 4th worst team in FBS and just lost to St. Francis, which is a school of 1,000 people. So, because Tysier Denmark is one of those guys that I was just really intrigued by. Obviously, we talked about this last week, a bunch of depth guys that we'd like to see get on the field against Bowling Green, which, obviously did not happen. But I just, I think he was the last guy to come to campus. If not, it was cornerback Kenny Woosley. But I just think that's someone I want to see get on the field. Obviously, James Franklin has highlighted him a bunch, just saying that's going to be a guy that's going to be hard to keep off the field. And obviously, it's been 2 games. They're still working through some things. But I would like to see him get on the field against Kent State. I don't know if you guys have any other depth guys that you want to see get out there.
I mean, I just think in general, I think you'll kind of see more of that depth in general just like later on in the season. I think even though coaches are like, okay, we have to approach every game the same, we have to do this and that, you're not going to show all of your stuff against Kent State. You're not going to show all of your stuff against Bowling Green. You're not going to even show some of your players that are really sneaky. Like Franklin's talked about a couple of guys that might be surprises this year, but I guarantee there's someone he has in the shadow, just waiting and waiting and waiting for that. Let's say Ohio State or USC when they just need him, and we're going to be like, where did they come from? They might, have Tyreek Hill type speed, and we never know. They might send them inside when the media comes out for practice. We could have no clue. So I think that's the beauty of just playing football and being able to kind of be deceptive of what you show and, how we go about that as the season progresses.
And I think no matter how Penn State does against Kent State, we're going to see depth regardless because of some of the injuries that we have happened against Bowling Green. And West Virginia, KJ Winston was not at practice on Tuesday. And considering Tom Allen's running a 3-safety system, that's kind of big, especially because he's their best safety probably. So I think we're going to see more of Dejon Lane, freshman who Franklin said is green-lighted, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to see more of him. I think that's a depth guy that people are interested to see and who we're just going to have to see if KJ Winston's not ready to go for Kent State or if it's a long-term injury. And then same Andrew Rapplier. Andrew Rapplier has a long-term injury. I saw him on the sideline in crutches after Bowling Green. It was an unexpected out on the availability report, and now he has a long-term injury. So I think we're going to see a lot of the tight end depth. I think Luke Reynolds definitely going to get green-lighted. He's going to be out there a lot. Even Joey Schlaffer, the redshirt freshman, him and Reynolds are always kind of like a pair to me. So I think we'll see him more. But I think just because of the injuries that Penn State's had was to some key guys, like depth's just going to be huge anyway. So
yeah. Another injury, Tamir Robinson went down against West Virginia. I think it was on the kickoff, after the half at some point. Didn't come back. I saw him on the field, street clothes, is inactive against Bowling Green. And he was one special teams player of the week for the team, that week against West Virginia. So I think that's a blow. Obviously, it didn't really look severe, but what do I know? I'm not going to speculate. And I think, KJ, him, obviously Raps long-term, but those are guys you can rest, obviously, if they're on a week-to-week basis, considering you've got the bye week. Kent State, ideally, whatever, they're in a position where they don't need those guys on the field. But I think not necessarily tight end, but I think with KJ being sidelined, we saw Jalen Reed move back to the deepest guy on the field alongside Zachy Wheatley, and you saw Cam Miller going in at the Lion role, which I think obviously he filled in fine. That when he filled in for him, the defense obviously performed better in the second half. But I think that's a blow. Obviously, that's not a knock on what Cam Miller's done. He's been productive so far, but Jalen Reed's just been that guy for the defense, and to take him out of that Lion role is just kind of significant. I don't know if you guys have any other takeaways in terms of that for the depth, but
yeah, I mean, I think going back to KJ, I think what will be interesting for me is to kind of see how he comes back from injury. I mean, obviously he has extra time with having the bye week and everything, but I mean he's supposed to be going, I would say, first or second round in the draft. A lot of guys try to play prevention ball. I don't think he'll, sit out the season, but I do think sometimes it's that mental aspect of, okay, I need to make sure I don't get hurt so I can, or, get a severe injury so I can, be ready for the NFL and things like that. So I think that'll be the most interesting thing, just to see how he plays, especially the rest as the season progresses and, opponent by opponent, because, of course, obviously you don't want to get hurt, but, you still have a season to play, still have football to play. So it'll be interesting to see how his mental is going through the rest of the season.
What do we think about the linebacker depth now that no Tamir either?
I mean, you said last week it's definitely concerning, slightly, just because it's concerning, but it's also Tom Allen's only playing two linebackers, and I think as long as Rojas, King, Eldon are healthy, and Dom DeLuca, they should be okay, because that's four pretty elite linebackers that you can rotate through. But if one of them goes down, if anything else if Tamir's injury is long term, then kind of gets a little dicey. But I mean, for now I'm not worried. But also with the defense concerns, the linebackers have to be playing well up to standard. And if they're not, then there's not really anyone else hidden that is going to come in and do any better.
Yeah, I mean, I think going off of that, I think the one thing is that their linebackers, they're kind of a little lucky because a lot of their best linebackers are really inside linebackers, and that's really all you kind of have in a 4-2-5. You have the Bill, you have the Mike. So I think that kind of helps them so they can kind of keep going down the depth chart. Obviously, they don't want any more injuries, but I think that's a kind of a spot where they're like, okay, we can kind of deal with this, we can work with this, but I think you'll have to see some new contributors step up. I mean, I think, right now they're good at linebacker, but I think that, you're just 1 or 2 injuries away. Of course, you don't want to predict that, but of course, 1 or 2 injuries away, you're like, okay, who can we play? But of course, they also do have Abdul Carter who can step back up and play some linebacker when needed. So I think they're fine right now, but it isn't, the ideal situation.
Yeah, I mean, Lexi, you called Dom DeLuca and Tyler Elson elite. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. But
good enough. They're good enough.
They're good enough. They're good enough. Those are good rotational
Elite
pieces.
in the system.
Yeah, they're good rotational pieces. I think as you get into the later important stretches of the season, assuming Penn State's in a comfortable position, Tony Rojas and Cook King aren't leaving the field. Realistically, if they do, it's just for a breather. Like, they're going to be playing meaningful snaps. And I know, Avery, that was important. I think you touched on Abdul. Considering through 2 games, he's only played defensive end and hasn't really – he's been productive. He's been disruptive. Obviously, he hasn't shown up on the stat sheet, really. But he's only played defensive end so far, and he hasn't really played linebacker. And obviously, it's – when your terms of, like, snap count, last year at linebacker, he never left the field. Like, defensive end, it's different. He's rotating in, and obviously you're putting way more stress on different parts of your body than you did at linebacker. And that was something he didn't directly mention, but, like, post-game against Bowling Green, he talked about he's still getting used to it. Like, he just needs those reps. And I think they don't really want to put him at linebacker, I guess, would be my point of view, unless they really need to with the depth. Considering defensive end, obviously they're a little deeper, but Abdul, you're looking at, like, a top pick in the draft, assuming he's productive just based on his raw upside. So I think, we covered everything there is to know about the bye week, Bowling Green, obviously Penn State. You've got 40 to 50 players in the NFL. Pick one performance that stood out to you.
Well, obviously Saquon Barkley. I mean, 3 touchdowns in his Eagles regular season debut. Social media went crazy. And I honestly think we're going to see a lot of that from him this year. I think the Eagles know he's probably the best player for them on offense, if not, but if not the best player for them on offense. And I think this is just going to be a huge year for him. I think people kind of forget how explosive he truly is and how amazing he was as a rookie in New York. And I think that people are not like sleeping on him, but I think people just have kind of forgotten just how great of a raw running back he is and how great of a pass catching running back he is and how just versatile he is in an offense. So I think his performance really stood out to me. He reached over 100 yards on the ground. Last year, he only had 1 rushing game.
Hurts me as a Giants fan. It just hurts me as a Giants fan.
He only had 1 rushing game over 100 yards last season, and he already matched that in week 1. So I think it's just going to be a huge year for him.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm just going to take Micah Parsons. I mean, obviously, 4 tackles and a sack. I mean, it's a pretty good game from him. Obviously, he's always been able to do, 3 sacks, 7 tackles, but I think it's not always in the tackles and sacks. I think he made a pretty big impact. I mean, the Browns looked terrible. I mean, Deshaun Watson didn't look good at all. And I think, in Madden you have fearmonger, which is where, anytime that you're basically lined up, the quarterback is scared. I think that's what happens when Micah Parsons is there. I mean, obviously Tom Brady commentated his first game, and he gave him the LFG Player of the Week.
That's
so
huge.
Yeah, LFG. I mean, I think that's big for Micah Parsons. I think we're looking for another big year for him, another race for Defensive Player of the Year, most likely. So, I mean, I think that's a good start for him, and I expect even a lot more, going into the rest of the season.
Yeah, those obviously 2 are the biggest that stood out to me. You saw Jawan Johnson had a nice touchdown. Chris Godwin had another touchdown as well. He had the second most receiving touchdowns in franchise history for the Buccaneers, so that's obviously he's working his way up there. I mean, off the top of my head, I want to assuom Mike Evans is number 1.
Yes.
Yeah, he's number 1.
He's he's like 60 clear.
Yeah, so I don't really know if Godwin's catching that, but obviously, it's cool to see him working his way up in the record books. But other than that, a couple rookies saw the field for the first time from this past draft class. Obviously, didn't really do anything meaningful. Chow Robinson saw some snaps on both kickoff teams, and he worked in a few defensive snaps. Olu, you saw him on some extra point and field goal attempts.
What do we think about Will Levis's week 1? Former Penn State quarterback.
Not good.
Mr. Mayo Man?
We can. Yeah, I don't even think we need to talk about that.
Better than Bo Nix?
It's tough.
Or Bryce Young?
I mean, I'm coming from a Daniel Jones.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, so
what's
Gardner Minshew.
We got to rank those 4. Daniel Jones, Bo Nix, Bryce Young, Will Levis.
I think they're all just bad.
Yeah. I think, how when they get drafted, they go to Raising Cane's and start serving? I think that was their practice because they'll be flipping burgers pretty soon, honestly.
Yeah,
Let's be honest. They will be.
Speaking of Bo Nix, and we're getting off topic here, but I have to
This
say
is
it
all
now.
gonna-
I can say it now.
This is making
Joel
me
Haas,
mad.
as you guys can see, is not here. He's on the IR this week. But I saw a picture of freshman Joel Haas. Joel is the senior. We're all younger than him, but it was young Joel Haas with a game day when Penn State played Auburn. And it was him holding a sign saying like Bo Nix is like stinks or like something like that. If we could pop that up, like that'd be sick. But I think we're getting off target, and I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Thank you everybody for watching. For more football content, head to psucollegian.com and make sure to follow us on socials.
See ya.